Criminal co-eds took over college campuses this week. Did you notice? They say it's about freeing Gaza. They say it's about Palestine. But we really all know that it's about despising Romans 13. It's about hating the sword bearer and throwing off empire, as they say. But what does this evil have to do with our Concordia Universities? Anything? Well, yeah. And I bet you can guess. I'll give you one little hint to help you along. You ready? DEI. Okay, well, I guess that's probably just the entire answer, but hey, who has time for games? Let's get into it. Welcome to The Truth at All Costs, friends and foe alike. I'm your host, Reverend Tyrel Bramwell. I'm the pastor of St. Mark Lutheran Church way out here in Ferndale, California, where we're not fixated on a person's ethnicity. No, sir. We're focused on his or her salvation. Salvation in the blood of Christ Jesus. On this podcast, you get straight talk, friend, about the culture from the Christian perspective. No pandering, no placating, no politically correct lies to aid in the devil's murderous ways. No, sir. We're Christians, and our aim is to be faithful to the whole counsel of God's word, understanding the spirit of our day, and therefore upon what battlefield we're fighting. And it would do us well to pay attention, wouldn't it? We work toward peace if possible, friend, but speak the truth at all costs. We'd love to hear from you. It makes the podcast all that much better, so much better. So comment on the video if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, or on Rumble, and connect with me on Instagram or on X. My handle is Tyrel Bramwell. It's just my name, sans the title, right? So it's just Tyrel Bramwell. Don't look for Rev, don't look for Pastor, just look for Tyrel Bramwell. You can also send me an email at tyrelbramwell.com/contact. That's tyrelbramwell.com/contact. Posting a YouTube comment on episode 7 of Truth at All Costs, Sam Taylor 3087 said, "Sir," speaking to me, "you are not intelligent." And you're right, Sam Taylor 3087. I am actually a fool. I'm a fool who preaches Christ crucified for the forgiveness of sins. Yes, sir. And I give thanks to God that it pleases him to save those who believe in Jesus through the folly of what I preach, through the foolishness of God that is wiser than men, and the weakness of God that is stronger than men, even stronger and wiser than men like you, Sam Taylor 3087. But thank you, sir. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for helping the algorithm to move this video out to, well, episode 7, that video, out to more people, as your comment helps YouTube know that, hey, this video is worth watching. So thanks, guy. I really appreciate it. Now, guys, as you know, American colleges dominated the news cycle this week because woke ideals promote woke behavior, and woke behavior is newsworthy precisely because it's destructive, violent, and in a word, evil. And you know, it turns out when you don't teach children the realities of the world, realities like, you know, the limitations of one's biological sex, or perhaps like the history that European settlers didn't actually steal the land from the tribes that were in this area before we got here, but the European settlers actually won it from them in fair and square nation v. nation conquest, the way all nations have operated since the fall of man. Or how about that they weren't taught law and order, that they see that law and order is meaningless because there are no consequences for those incarcerated criminals who aren't actually incarcerated, but are released from jail 30 minutes after their arrest, even after stealing things in broad daylight, even after causing all kinds of problems with their drug habits in broad daylight, living on the streets and vandalizing and hurting people and burglarizing, all this sort of stuff. No one gets locked away when we have these soft leftist DAs who just want to love people to rehabilitation as if that could ever actually work. Does anyone read their Bible? Or how about witnessing the open border problem where illegal foreigners cross our sovereign borders without repercussions? and usually get rewarded for it. They're invited here to do it illegally by the Biden administration and the Democratic Party in general. And then when they get here, they're protected and they're rewarded. Well, it turns out that when a generation of kids see this behavior their entire lives, they don't actually understand the difference between peaceful protest and criminal trespassing and vandalism and burglary, theft, etc. This criminal activity that we've been seeing in the news, you've been seeing on Columbia, NYU, it's now, UCLA is going on right now. This activity has been going on 40 minutes to the north of Ferndale at Cal Poly Humboldt, Humboldt County. That's where we're at here in Ferndale. And you might be interested to know that the school, it's in the city known as Arcata. That's the name of the city, where the unionism of the Lutheran Church of Arcata has yet to be resolved. You've heard me talk about that before on air. After more than 40 years, the LCMS and the ELCA are still being represented in one church as if they're the same thing, as if everything's hunky-dory, at least publicly, at least to the lay people, even though the district presidents, when they ordain new ministers in the LCMS, they say, hey, when we're done here, how about all the ELCA priestesses and pastors, you guys step out of the picture because we got to get one for our CNH district email. And hey, the LCMS guys, they're just, they're old fuddy-duddies, and they won't appreciate having the ladies in this picture. They know what they're doing, guys. They've known it the whole time. My heart goes out to the pastor who was ordained into that call. This last one, he's now retired. He was a church worker in a DCE program before that or something along those lines. And yeah, that's what he told me. How embarrassing. On his ordination day, he had to literally have his district president be deceiving and deceptive on the day where he was entering the ministry. We do that, though. The Lutheran Church of Arcata is allowed to exist even after years, just in my part, last few years, of calling for this to be ended, and a generation, longer than the Israelites wandered in the wilderness. We do it because, after all, we're a loving community, man. We got to love our neighbor. We got to be patient. We got to endure. Well, unfortunately, that's not what Scripture means when it says be patient and to bear all things that way. No, it doesn't say tolerate evil in your midst. In fact, 1 Corinthians 5 says to expel the evil. And we know this. We've done it with Corey Mahler recently in our mind's memory, right? The excommunicated Corey Mahler. Did you see that episode? I've mentioned it several times that he was excommunicated. We know how to do that in our synod. Why are we not doing things? Why are we not using the discipline of the church that we have? Anyway, I'm getting a little off topic here. The kids of Cal Poly Humboldt, they're upset, guys. They're upset because Columbia, it's getting all the attention. And now UCLA has swooped in and taken all the attention as well. And you'll notice from their comments about the attention, just what is driving their frustration. It's their Marxist, oppressed worldview. Some guy on X called Jersey Noah said, learn from the working class, poor students of Humboldt Cal Poly who are currently being held in county jail. That's right, they got arrested. I think got released last night. I don't think anybody actually got charged. I don't know all the details. And this user here, this is a different user. He tweeted, or she tweeted, or whomever tweeted, the revolution will not take place at elite institutions. Little jealous of the level of institution, I think. Please support the students protesting at public colleges near you. Schools like Cal Poly Humboldt are making more progress with less news coverage. And another user, this one called Kala, also reminded us that what we saw this week is part of the Marxist revolution, where who unites? Yeah, the workers of the world. Workers unite. Now, I want to give these guys some attention. I want to do my part to give the poor, they're college students, so apparently they can afford tuition, but there's these poor working class college students. I want to give them a little bit of attention that they're seeking. They're dying for it. Not because I agree with their cause. In fact, I think it's, antipodal to that of the church. How's that for a subtle callback to last week's show? But no, it's necessary to give them some attention, unfortunately, because I want to discuss some of the corollaries that we can observe between this whole pro-Palestine Lollapalooza stuff we're seeing and what's happening on our Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Concordia University campuses. You might be thinking, well, is there some sort of free Gaza movement there? Well, I haven't seen that, but pay attention and let's see the connection here. But first, before we get to that, hang with me for a slight little stroll down memory lane. Before I could go to seminary, I had to get my degree, like everyone does, my undergrad degree, my bachelor's degree. I was just a poor working stiff. I went from high school to work. I started a family. I was just a blue-collar guy. No credit, no victim points because I'm white and I'm straight and I'm Christian. And I worked in the oil field. So, big oil, they're the enemy. We can't give anybody victim points and be working class, Marxists for that. No unions in the oil field, this sort of thing. So pretty conservative stuff. I started talking to my pastor. I'm a young guy living in Wyoming with a young family. I said, Pastor, I want to go to Concordia. I'm chomping at the bit. I want to get my theology. I want to start filling this old brain bucket of mine with biblical brilliance. So where should I go? I think I want to go to Irvine. I'm born in California. I hear my parents talking about California all the time. So I want to go back there. I want to check that out. And he told me, well, you go to California, you're going to see some challenges there, Ty. You're going to meet up with some contemporary worship practices out there in California. The Pacific Southwest District's not the most faithful, not the most confessional in our synod. There's a lot of contemporary worship there in the chapel and in the church you'll be attending, your family, exposing your family to that sort of stuff. And it's like, oh, that's right. Good wisdom, Pastor, good wisdom. Want to avoid the co-wo all I can. So, well, how about Portland? I have some friends from high school who went up toward the Northwest. What about that one? Well, same story, but worse, guy. Oh, okay. So I looked at every single Concordia in the CUS system. At that time, we had 10. We had 10 Concordias back in somewhere around 2006. And so I looked at them all, and I settled on CUAA, Concordia University, Ann Arbor, for a practical reason. It was geographically the closest to the seminary in Fort Wayne, which was known for its confessional formation of pastors, right? Fort Wayne. And I knew I wanted to be there eventually. So one big move across country for a little move after I got my bachelor's degree. So now fast forward to today, and we're down to 6 Concordias. Portland, Bronxville, and Selma closing. And now Austin is wrongly removing itself from the Synod, and there's this ongoing shameful lawsuit scuffle going on here in the Lord's Church, created by unfaithful schismatics, at least as I understand the situation. So we're down to 6. However, the Concordia I chose to attend was actually almost the first to close, as if that's something to be proud of, the first to close back in 2010, the same year I graduated. That was its last year as it's an independent college. It was saved by becoming a satellite campus of Concordia University, Wisconsin. So technically, I think you could argue that we actually only have 5 universities on 6 campuses if we're being technical and being honest. And if you recall, CUAA, Concordia Ann Arbor, was almost closed again this year, just barely scraped by the skin of its teeth. It was saved. More money was flooded in, and this seems to be a problem we're seeing with all of our Concordias. They're just hemorrhaging money. Very bad planning and very bad bookkeeping and budgeting seems to be a problem across the Concordia system. So I'm suspecting we'll see CUAA close down eventually. I mean, it's coming. Sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it seems to me that the writing is on the wall. If not fiscally, well then, faithfully. What is going on with our Concordias? Why would we see half of our Concordias close down in 14 years since 2010? Well, and really, I have to look at the dates, but most of them started happening since the last 5, I think. You have to check that for sure. I'm not quite sure on that, but I think in the last 5, we've closed them all. And then 2010 being the one that almost happened with Ann Arbor. But put simply, guys, what are we dealing with? Idolatry. That's the deal. As I quoted Luther on a previous episode, I don't remember which episode it was, one of the early ones. I mean, this is number 10. So one of the first ones, he talked about how all he cared about was being known for being faithful. He didn't care about being known for being successful. However you measure that. It's not about success. It's about being clear that the Christian is faithful. Our schools are closing because the people running them do not have that Christian heart about them, basing it on externals. They are not focusing on being faithful above all else, but have become very good, unfortunately, very good at compromising with the world and convincing themselves and everyone around them that their actions are biblical. I met this firsthand at the introduction kind of talk at Irvine. My son enrolled in Irvine a few years back, and the president, he was new. I think he came down from Portland. I don't know if he was the president of Portland, but he came down from Portland after that closure, and he was giving the parents this rundown about being a Christian community and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, he made a big, long deal about how we're not of the world, but we're in the world, all the while explaining why the church is doing all these worldly type things. So basically, he used the Bible verse that he knew, that we all know, and that we all use to say this worldly thing we're doing, we're not of the world, but we are in it, so we're going to do that thing. No, that's not what that verse is about, and yet this is exactly how we use it. Why do we have a praise band in church? Well, we're not of the world. No, of course not. But we are in the world, and so we're using these methods to reach people. That's the opposite of what that verse means, guy. That's the opposite. So for the decision makers, little tirade, there's probably going to be a lot of those throughout this episode. This is a near and dear topic to my heart, as you might be able to tell. But for the decision makers at these schools, it should be near and dear to your heart as well, Christian. Everything is driven by money. Everything is driven by enrollment. The advancement department. It was obvious to see, even in 2007, how the advancement department is driving everything. When I set foot in Ann Arbor, I could tell. Yeah, even me, even this uneducated, oil-filled trash guy like me could tell it wasn't about being confessionally Lutheran, but about keeping the doors open. Now, I pray this doesn't offend you, but if it does, well, I made a video all about that, so you can take a look at that if you want. It's even the case at our finest institution of higher education, Concordia Theological Seminary, Fort Wayne, Indiana, my other alma mater, where I did my MDiv work. When I was an admissions counselor there back in 2020, when I went back to work for the seminary with the job of helping men get to the SEM, become seminarians so they could become pastors, I was told by the chief communications officer, Reverend Bill Johnson, that I couldn't say certain things online, even though the things I was trying to say online, he had no problem agreeing with, seeing that they were biblical, that they were faithful things. Strong and bold, like we're always saying we are, wouldn't work well at CTSFW. When I pressed for a reason why, he told me that it could potentially put off seminary donors, those who fund our practice. So we won't have any institution for men to come to if we don't have money. So the donors who weren't young men, primarily, who weren't resonating toward faithful biblical language of boldness and strength, although they should, but were primarily in that older LWML demographic, they might be put off if we come off too strong. So strong, yeah, Pastor, but not too strong. Now, I was only there for 7 months. I only lasted 7 months as admissions counselor, and this is why. I mean, I was there. This happened within my first month, and this was just the beginning. My onboarding there was horrendous because of things like this. I was very naive. And I was also very clear that I wasn't willing to be party to that sort of institutional procedure. In fact, me and the COO, or CCO, whatever, communications guy, CCO, we had a pretty good talk about 1 Timothy 3:6 and not capturing weak women and actually being honest and having integrity and these sorts of things, if my memory serves me right. It's the same problem that all of our schools have. It's a Luke 12 anxiety over temporal provisions. We struggle to trust that God works all things out for the good of those who trust in him. We struggle. It's the same problem, as you are well aware, that I ran into at KFUO, the LCMS's broadcast voice, as you all know this. It's a message of suppress your fidelity, suppress plain speech, honest speech, suppress the clear confession, because the truth might, well, in the Synod's case, upset the older generation, those who have all the money. The truth might get someone's panties in a wad, to say it very crassly. I'm a hillbilly from the sticks, right? So it just might get your britches all up in a knot. So don't do that, Pastor. I mean, be bold. Be bold, especially when we're talking about things happening in other parts of the world. But when it comes home to roost, we got to be extremely careful. Not for maintaining the faith of a weaker brother, but for maintaining the flow of money coming into our institutions. So I also ran into this at my second call. Yeah, a church, not an institution, not a higher education institution, and not the Synod, but just one of our churches. This was a church I served that had a dying school when I got there, and I wasn't there very long either. The VP of the congregation had instructed the business manager to steal money from the faculty and staff prior to my arrival, like for years prior to my arrival. It had been going on for quite a while. The district president was well aware of it, in order to pay the churches and the school's bills. I didn't know about this when I received the call and accepted the call, but then I found out about it about week 2 of my pastorate and found myself at odds with this unrepentant sinner who unfortunately was emboldened because he had money. So much money, in fact, that he pointed out that he could just call up President Harrison anytime he wanted to deal with this wayward pastor of his. So I needed to watch myself. Now, I'm not saying President Harrison would have had his back. That's not what I'm saying, but that's what he thought. I'm confident, actually, that President Harrison would not have had his back. But I'm speaking toward the guy's skewed wiew. See, he knew President Harrison. He had a relationship, some kind of relationship with him, because he had donated some sort of large amount of money to the Wittenberg Schoolhouse Project. So he felt that he had a green light to misbehave sinfully at the church that I was called to pastor. So we have to keep the church and the school open, Pastor, is the kind of reasoning he had. So mind your business, and you just tend to the pulpit, guy. I'll handle the rest. Now, to be clear, guys, from last week's episode, what Reverend Gravener was talking about when he was talking about, pastors are to preach and let others govern, this is not what he was talking about, meaning he wasn't talking about just pastors put your head in the sand and don't ever pay attention to what's going on with the government of the church. In fact, you have to know what's going on so you can preach to it. So when you see sin happening in the congregation that you've been called to be a steward of, you can correct it from the pulpit and from the personal engagement with those sinners who I hope are repentant and not unrepentant, though some will leave. In fact, some did leave before I did, as we tried to clean up the mess. I would like to say that we did clean up the mess, and the next guy who took over as pastor had a much easier time of tending to the sheep. This is why our synodical schools are failing. Lack of faithfulness. We prefer, practically speaking, success rather than fidelity. We're fearful of what faithfulness might mean. If we surrender the control to the Lord and we're dependent upon Him, what might that mean for us? Could it mean hard times? Could it mean a decline in enrollment? Yeah, it could. And that scares us. Could it mean the doors close? Yes, it could. But look at the writing on the wall. 5 of our institutions are gone. We're down to, 5 with 6 campuses. So 4 of our institutions are gone, and 1 is almost there. Because we've been holding on to control, trying to do it the world's way. The world says that if you're going to increase enrollment, well, you need to start a football team or something. Right? This is what happened back in 2010. CUAA was breaking ground on building. I mean, they're broke. They have no money, but they got somehow the ability to put in a football team and a stadium and all this extra equipment. Why? So they could attract non-Lutheran players as missions to bring them the gospel and save the day. I remember telling my counselor, my theological professor, who was my counselor there, I remember telling him then, what are we doing? Is this the Lord's will? Is this faithful? How many of our Lutheran kids want to come to one of our Concordias because they have a football team? No, they want to come here because Lutheran schools are a prize, because the expectation is they will be teaching Lutheranism. That when we go to our science class or our math class or our social studies class, any of the classes, they are going to be in the same orientation as the Bible. They are going to work with it and not against it. But no, the higher ups, we got to put in a football team, football field, all that, spend all this money. And ask anyone who's graduated from a Concordia in the last 10 years, ask any Lutheran to give you an assessment on the spirit of the school based on Lutherans and non-Lutherans and how things look on the ground. You have 90% will be disgruntled about the Lutheran identity on our Lutheran campuses. That's how it works. So the problem is our fidelity to God, plain and simple. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Sorry if you hate me for it. You want to give a 1-star review because of it, whatever. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. So what is going on our campuses, specifically related to all the stuff we're seeing with this free Gaza stuff, these pro-Palestine protesters? One more thought on this before we get to that. I just want to mention this because I know some Lutherans are familiar with Luther's passing rain cloud example, where he's talking about the German lands. They were being rained down by the gospel. They were being refreshed by the gospel at that time during the Reformation. But that cloud passes. And now he actually says when the cloud passes, it doesn't come back. I don't know about that, but it does pass. And it just dawns on me that what we're experiencing with our Concordias is the passing of God's rain cloud that brings life, that brings the blessing of a harvest. If you actually did want to see where the rain cloud might be moving, not to be all doom and gloom, to add a little bit of light to this podcast, to this episode, you might want to look over somewhere around Casper, Wyoming, to see where the rain cloud of faithfulness, the rain cloud of the gospel is moving, because there, starting in 2025, you'll see a bunch of Lutheran students gathering at a Lutheran classical college that is for Lutherans and by Lutherans, that isn't caught up in the world's ways, but is trying to do things for the sake of the church and the church's youth, for the sake of the church in the future. It's an actual Lutheran college for Lutheran students. Praise be to God for the people in Wyoming. I was just thinking, I got so much I could say on this. It is a heartfelt issue for me because there's a sense of disenfranchisement that comes with this, because when I left Wyoming and went out into the Synod, I was hit with this at the first place in our universities. It was a rude awakening for me. I took a tour. We'll get to the connection with the pro-Palestine thing. A little more history of Pastor Bramwell. I took a tour with my family of Concordia, Nebraska, which I would say is probably one of the better of the Concordias. This was a few years back. My son was thinking about going there. Well, he changed his mind after attending the chapel service. The chapel service had a theology professor that week was preaching a sermon. And I used the term sermon loosely because it was nothing more than a moralizing reading of a Pout fish kids book. Are you familiar with Pout fish? He read one of these kids books to encourage the student body to be more accepting and nice and this sort of thing. These are college students. The theology prof is treating them like they're kindergartners at a Concordia. This was a few years ago. They're not getting confessional Lutheranism. They're not getting a rigorous quality instruction like they will be at Luther Classical College. No, they're getting a really bad impersonation of Mr. Rogers. They're getting a Sesame Street experience. Speaking of books and theology professors, it's my pleasure, my friends, on behalf of adcrucem.com, adcrucem.com, to tell you about their newest offering. That's right, a book dedicated to the sober-minded young men in our seminaries who earnestly desire to reflect a pattern of good works and to have the utmost integrity, reverence, and incorruptibility in their doctrine. The book is from my favorite living theologian. If you don't know who that is, it's Reverend Dr. David Scare of Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We just spoke about them. It's called Without the Shedding of Blood, There Is No Forgiveness of Sins. It's available right now at adcrucem.com and on Amazon. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I've included an Amazon affiliate link in the description of the show for your convenience. It costs you guys nothing for you guys to use that link. Nothing at all, but it does help out this YouTube channel. We get a little bit of a kickback from Amazon if you order it through Amazon. So think about this. You use that Amazon affiliate link and you support Lutheranism, faithful confessional Lutheranism, 3 times over, friend. You support Dr. Scare, you support Ad Crucem, and you support the Bramwells. How about that? Without shedding blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Includes 17 articles from 1972 to the present, chronicling 50 years of the church's ongoing struggle against higher criticism, gospel reductionism, antinomianism, and false theories of the atonement. With his own unique wit and wisdom, Reverend Scare demonstrates the truthfulness of God's word, the blessing of the sanctified life, and the absolute necessity of Christ taking our place to atone for our sins. The foreword was written by Reverend Benjamin Ball, and the introduction by Reverend Daniel Preuss. Without the shedding of blood is essential reading, friends. Whether you're a pastor or a seminarian, or if you just love to learn about history and theology, you'll be delighted to sit at the feet of this renowned professor, just like I did when I was at the seminary. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins by Reverend Dr. David Scare. I ordered my copy. Why haven't you ordered yours? Get after it. Okay, so let's start talking about how the criminal protests that we're seeing across the country relate to our Concordias. I hope I haven't belabored it too long. Let's get into it. And as we do, just a disclaimer, I make no promises that I won't be overly quippy, despite that being what Calculator Joe said he hasn't liked about recent episodes. Now see, people don't like certain things about me or whomever. And that's life. That's just life. But what we don't do is allow someone else's arbitrary opinion, which they have a right to have, even though it's been expressed publicly, to blow us around like tumbleweeds. No, we're not doing that. We're not people pleasers. We're Christians. I think Calculator Joe, he will be okay enduring my quippy or even overly quippy personality, whatever that means, if he wants to. And if he doesn't, well, he can click off the show, right? He can, with I completely respect that he has the ability to click that mouse and go listen to another podcast. And there's better Lutheran podcasters out there, so he can go do that. No hard feelings. I totally get it. If the LCMS would act like this, with this kind of self-assurance, knowing who we are and what we're doing, well, then we wouldn't have campuses closing every other year despite doing everything feasible according to the world to attract non-Lutherans to our campuses, hoping we can blow with the wind and get people to come. What we're doing on our campuses is what every so-called Lutheran church that's embraced the contemporary worldview, the Protestant liberalism out there, and therefore the contemporary worship practices, it's what every one of them has done in the name of missions, in the name of reaching people with the gospel. They're trying to grow or even just stay alive, and so they change their identity to be more inclusive to the diversity of people that they imagine they want to attract, making their church experience much more equitable to all perspectives of every kind of sinful person out there, just like the United Methodist Church did just this past week. We don't do that. We're not people pleasers. Friends, the connection between our Concordias and the illegal pro-Palestine activity happening on college campuses all over the country, it is, as I said at the top of the hour, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the accepted form of anti-Christian cultural Marxism, that divides people not as Scripture does, not rightly, not as believer or unbeliever. That's the only division there should be, saved or unsaved. No, it divides people as powerful and powerless, oppressor and oppressed. And our remaining Concordias, they have DEI departments on their campuses. Click on their websites and check it out for yourself. Some of them, they call them something slightly different, like the Office of Multicultural Engagement, little less honest. And they're doing it just as more colleges across the country are, as the Republicans are starting to push to outlaw DEI on college campuses because it is evil. And we can see it even from a non-Christian perspective. Just from a societal perspective, we can see how it is wrong and it is destructive to civilization. Now, here's a piece from Scott Yaner over at the Federalist titled, "If we want Western civilization to survive, DEI cannot." And I kind of think we all want Western civilization to survive. But DEI, he says, this ideology has flourished in our nation's academic institutions where it long ago captured faculties and then administrators. Disciplines such as sociology or gender studies have seen the principles of identity politics sewn into their professional standards. So there's no effective difference between subject matter there, the mastery of it, and then deep ideological indoctrination. Diversity advocates are absolutely correct that efforts to dismantle the DEI complex on campus mark a civilizational battle. A civilizational battle. DEI activities, writes Matthew H. Grindle of Elon University in Inside Higher Ed, are designed to address and dismantle structures and systems that perpetuate universal harm. The universal harms are racial disparities. The cause of such disparities is having standards. Standards are the key to civilization. Do our academics not see this? All you in Concordias out there, all you guys who are running this, do you guys not see this? There needs to be standards? That you're playing in a field that is ultimately, if you could extend out the logic, you're smart people, you're in the academy, if you extend out the logic, is breaking down the very thing that our colleges are supposed to be building up. And put bluntly, every day that our Concordias have their DEI departments, they are participating in the dismantling of our civilization, which we cannot tolerate, given that as Christians, we're called to serve our neighbors, not harm them. The Western civilization that matured and developed with the Christian church as the Christian church spread throughout Europe, we're seeing it dismantled. The civilization in question here is ours, the Christian one, the one that developed its framework and its society, its culture on the back of the church. Yenner continues, diversity advocates aim to dismantle essential elements of our civilization, such as the rule of law, impartially applied in favor of a two-tiered system of justice based on group identity. Intellectual diversity or free speech are code words for white supremacy or white privilege to DEI bureaucrats, and are implicitly violent because words can harm. Scientific achievement uses objectivity as a mark for racial and sexual disparities. So new standards for science are necessary. The Christian religion and traditional family must be dismantled because, well, they embody heteronormative oppression. You guys getting this? Cultural commentators can see it. The world can see it. Christianity is literally under attack through DEI programs on college campuses, and we're just like, hurrah! Yeah, let's do it. Let us in. Let's get this thing done. We want to be part of the cool kids. We want the world to send us their students so that we can be successful. We can keep our doors open. We can build our new buildings. We can become a top tier college while the churches are being torn down by the very people that we're saying we're trying to reach. You know why, guys? Let me be directly direct with you as much as I can possibly be without the pandering or the placating or the political light. Let's get it like down to the nth degree on that concept. Here's what it is. White guilt. It is white guilt. The LCMS suffers tremendously from white guilt. Lutheranism is German in origin, in its formation from the Reformation on, right? And the Scandinavian cultures as well. All that is very white. It's as white as you can get. And no matter what happens, we can't be seen as racist. Doesn't matter, even if it's wrong, and it is wrong, we're not racist. I wouldn't be a part of a church that's racist. But we hear it. We hear the threat of it. We hear the potential threat of it. We don't want to be perceived by as that. And I don't know if it has something to do with getting back into the World War era and being considered Nazis because we were German or something. Maybe we have this lingering like post-traumatic stress disorder, if there's such a thing, right? Maybe that's what's going on. But it is a form of white guilt. We hear it at every single pastors' conference out here in the C&H district. Not with those words, but that's what it is. We poke ourselves in the eye for being a people that immigrated from Europe and is therefore mostly white. We just feel guilty about it. Our DPs and our mission execs, they remind us of all the ethnic groups around us that we should be trying to reach. And they tell us, everybody, more or less, that if we're truly doing God's work, if we're truly doing mission work, well, if we're being missional, well, then we better be intentional about trying to reach a minority group. And so if your congregation doesn't have that kind of ministry, something's wrong. And you should really take a look at that. It's white guilt, stupidity. Because as I already said, we've become accustomed to letting opinions dictate our behavior rather than God's word. Stop it, Missouri. Stop it. You don't have to feel guilty for having German roots. Just because you're German in origin doesn't make you racist or Nazis, all right? Stop it. You can reach all people without even really looking at the demographics. Who's around you? If all there is around you are a bunch of white, working class, middle class Americans working on the oil field, and you're not seeing a lot of, Filipinos or something that's just not in your part of the world, don't feel bad about that. Just spread the gospel with whomever's around you. Just be you, Lutheran. Yenner continues. What's new about our situation is the capture of the managerial class. Diversity regulations like affirmative action imposed from above by administrations have long been common at elite institutions, but these impositions became increasingly tyrannical after 2010. Higher education administrations across the country began requiring strategic plans to impose ideological hiring processes like diversity statements and implicit bias training, curricular transformation, and changes in student life, such as separate commencement ceremonies for black graduates. Prosecution of professors for heterodox thinking became increasingly common. You mean like what happened to our own Reverend Dr. Gregory Schulz, who refused to go along with Concordia University, Wisconsin's DEI stuff and then got punished for it? And you can see links to the 3-part interview of Reverend Schulz done by Reverend Christian Preuss of Luther Classical College. I'll leave the links below. Take a look at that 3-part series. It's great. So, I went to CUAA. So let's start there with some examples. I hope you've been waiting along for this. Some examples of the evils the administrators are making all of us in the Synod party to. According to their website, Concordia University Ann Arbor has a special committee on diversity and belonging that acknowledges that too often people of color, minoritized, and underrepresented people endure harm directly or indirectly through various forms of aggression and microaggression. Whoa. The wokeness is unbelievable in that statement. Each of us has a responsibility to educate ourselves and to use our influence to overcome prejudice and bigotry on our campuses and in our communities. Let's just admit to being sinners of sins we haven't even committed. We do confess our sins, but man, let's do exactly the opposite of what Luther said. Let's start mining our hearts and making confession a torture. That's what this is. This is the academic version of going to confession and looking to make yourself feel bad. It's a flagellation or something, right? This is just whipping yourself to make sure you feel really guilty. It also affirms that prejudice, bigotry, and racism are a problem. No, they weren't a problem until people made them a problem. And that all people have a right to feel safe and respected. So right there at CUAA's website, they are saying the lies are true. That's what they're saying. The lies are true. It affirms that prejudice, bigotry, and racism are a problem. Now, they weren't a problem until the race hustlers made them a problem. I take great offense to one of our Missouri Synod institutions having this on their website. This is ridiculous. Each of us has a duty to do what we can to provide that safety where we can. Well, here we go. I'm doing my part, Cardinals. I'm doing my part. You're lying. I have a duty to do my part, to make sure people feel safe, to provide, what did you say? Safety where we can. Safety from you. Sorry to say. Really sorry to say. You're my alma mater, but hey, that's gross. That is disgusting. What you're saying about the Christians at that campus and in this church body. What do they say? Talk about, we have a duty to listen to and talk about what's happening and to make changes to improve our Christian community together. But progress, yeah? Let's make progress. Let's be progressive. And this special woke committee says we honor each other when we act and use the power we have to effect change as required when required and in ways that love God and our neighbor. Well, hey, I feel honored. I hope you feel honored that I'm using my small little platform to address your evil. So, I'm just doing what you say to do there. It's all about power, right? You said it was about power, using our power. How very Marxist of you, because Marxism is all about power and the powerful, using their power for the powerless. I thought we were Christians. All of a sudden, I feel like we're Marxists. Man, this false gospel in all of its various forms, it's irritating is what it is. Christianity is not about using power, people. Power seizes, as the race hustlers know. They're quick to declare. But Christianity, it's all about authority. And authority doesn't seize. Authority is given away. Authority sacrifices. It gives. It doesn't take. It's diametrically opposed to power. Authority is. I'm surprised. We got academics. One of my professors at Ann Arbor, he dinged me on a paper because I used the word fabric when I was talking about God, the fabric of God. And I was trying to use academic language as a uneducated, oil-filled trash hick. And he rightly said that word was too material when talking about God. So he schooled me on that. If we can have that kind of scrutiny on our theological papers, why can't we have that kind of scrutiny on our website statements of what we're doing? Because that statement is horrendous theologically. With Shanitra Sheff in place as the director of multicultural engagement at CUAA, they've bought into this religion of the left as they work, quote, on off-campus social justice movements and discussions. Social justice. That's what we're doing now in the Missouri Synod, I guess. We're doing social justice. All right. And then it says, see the diversity advocacy team, which was apparently created with the help of an intern named Eddie Goldston, that it exists to provide students the opportunity to interact with other students and staff in discussing the current cultural climate and assisting with opportunities and events that center around race, diversity, and inclusion. That's from Eddie Goldston. As a result of Ann Arbor's Special Committee on Diversity and Belonging, the school has a racist black student union. That's just the reality of it. All black student unions, according to their nature, incubate and encourage racial division, which, if you're thinking about it, is the opposite of what Jesus does, as Paul tells us in Galatians 3:28, that in him there is not Jew nor Greek, right? Listen here to what the members of the Black Student Union, what they had to say back in 2020 with all the George Floyd, blackout day stuff that was going on. Take a look at this clip.
Outcries continue over the death of George Floyd. Last night,
Hey, make a change, baby. Let's do it. Y'all see it? Y'all see what it say? Y'all gotta feel our pain, man. Take all of us.
As a black man in America, it's a shame that we have to move a certain way or act a certain way so we don't scare or offend the white officer. Being black and an African American in America is not a weapon.
We all have to feel the black man's pain, that student said. And then the president of the BSU at the time, he talked about the unfairness of how black men in America have to act to not scare white officers. You know what this reminds me of? What we saw at Humboldt State this week. They spray painted pro-Palestine slogans all over the walls there at the campus, but they also spray painted things like kill cops. Oh, what do the cops have to do with pro-Palestine? Things like justice for Josiah. Well, that's our local phrase about black injustice. It's one of our little slogans about how white cops are crooked and things like this. There was also vandalism that connected the campus takeover, which was supposed to be about freeing Gaza, to the 2023 death of Manuel Esteban Piez-Terán during the raid of No Cop City. Hold on a second. You see the correlation? This isn't just about what's going on in Israel. This is nothing more than Black Lives Matter 2.0. So if you had already thought about the Gaza connection to BLM, then you know this is all about throwing off the colonizers and rejecting imperialism and all this kind of stuff that we hear the left talking about all the time. It's a cultural conflict against law and order, indeed against God, per Romans 13. Don't believe me? Well, just listen to what one of our Cal Poly Humboldt criminals said to her comrades on this over-the-radio broadcast when she was talking to people at Chapel Hill in North Carolina.
We're able to keep pushing forward in our militancy with a commitment to not backing down at all costs. And we're holding this line because, de-escalation is a return to normalcy. And a return to normalcy is turning a blind eye to the suffering of Palestinians and the calls to escalation that they've made. And to the people that say that escalation is individualist, it's not. If you're truly decentering yourself, you will act without fear of what might happen to your career and your degree and your future that are tied up in empire, and recognize that empire is responsible for the genocide that is happening right now. And the risk of allowing genocide and empire to continue is far greater than individual loss that are inspiring to you to not wait to be given permission to do something that you feel called to, and to not act out of fear of the state, because de-escalation is what the state desires. And they desire this because it's easier for them. By refusing the state de-escalation, the state is forced to show its hand, to show itself for what it is, which we all know is a violent police state that will go to immense lengths to defend genocide.
De-escalation is a return to normalcy, she said. So we want to avoid that. Empire can't be allowed to continue, she said. The goal is to bring down the state, she said. That they see the state, the police state, even though it's made up in their mind, they see that as their cause. They are trying to dismantle Western civilization because they see it as oppressive. Biden's America is all about DEI, and yet they're trying to destroy the country. Why? Because they have to totally bring down America and rebuild it in their own image. The police state they mentioned is their own perception. It's not reality. Those police who have to protect their own well-being because criminals are doing stupid and unpredictable things, and so they wear body armor and use tools like shields to restore peace and order. That's not police state, guys. That's called prudence. They're going into a situation you created, and they're wanting to go home to their family at the end of it. And so, yeah, they do the smart thing, and they arm up. And if they can't use lethal force, which they can't so many times, they have to protect their body with shields and with helmets and with knee pads and arm. The reason they look like the Gestapo is because you're being stupid, and they're trying to get home to their family at the end of the day. And so we need to figure out what the solution is for our Black Student Union president at Concordia Ann Arbor. What's the solution? Yeah, it's true that there is more crime among black populations. Is that the white cop's fault? Is it the black cop's fault? Is it the Mexican cop's fault? No. It's a cultural phenomenon that is actually derived from leftist policies that have destroyed the black family, secular, godless policies. It's actually the phenomenon that is the cultural derivative of trying to seize power. It's Marxism playing itself out among the black population as it's playing itself out in all of our lives. But that's how it looks in that particular population. So you know the answer is stop voting for Democrats, guy. Quit putting those people in power. But even then, we also want to recognize the narrative is tacitly false. It is false. We can avoid the whole thing. As Christians, we know this. This isn't a political commentary show. This is a Christian education apologetics show or something to that effect. We can avoid this whole thing as Christians by focusing on what Christians are supposed to be focusing on. What is that? Christ. We're Christians. At least that's the assumption I'm making for our Concordias. We don't address social issues like the world does. We don't engage the culture the way the world does because we know something the world doesn't. We know Jesus. So what's the solution to societal division? When we have cultural unrest, what's the solution? Is it DEI initiatives? No, not at all. It's Jesus Christ crucified for the forgiveness of sins. You know this. Christ is the only permanent solution to the dividing wall of hostility that race hustlers keep stirring up in their pursuit of power, of godless, earthly power. We know the solution, and yet we go down this line. It's like we blindfold ourselves and we're like, hey, world, lead me off the cliff. We know better. Lutherans of all Christians know better. It's about time we start acting like it. The existence of DEI departments on our Concordia campuses is clear evidence that our Concordias are not making decisions as the church ought to, but instead they are making decisions as worldly institutions of higher education. And that's what they'll tell you as well when you ask them. When you ask when a faithful Christian pins down a member of one of these administrations, when he pins him against the wall and he presses him for honest answers, theologically, what he gets is some milquetoast line about, well, this is a university, not a church, Pastor. Pastor Bramwell, this is a university. Things operate differently here. You're a pastor. I understand. And I don't expect you to understand how things have to work at this kind of institution. You're just used to being a pastor of a church. Well, it's a lot more complicated than what you're used to in your parish. Yeah, this conversation really happened. And I reject that pathetic excuse with every fiber of my being, with extreme prejudice. As we say back home, the church needs to drop the deuce or get off the pot. We don't typically say it about the church, but that's the saying, and it's the G-rated version. It's not complicated. And we don't get to play the church card when it suits our fancy and then play the academy card at other times to dance around issues that we don't want to deal with. The reality is all of our schools are part of Christ's church, period. They belong to Christ. And just like with our parishes and with our districts and with our synod itself, certain people are afforded the privilege of stewarding those institutions for a time. The question that I want to know, the question I ask with love in my heart, is, will they be found faithful when the master of the house returns? Will the president of the university be found faithful? Will the board of regents be found faithful? Will our presidents of synod or districts or our pastors be found faithful when the master of the house returns? And no, the presidents and the regents and the department heads, nobody will be able to say to Jesus, but Lord, you got to understand that, we had accreditation requirements we had to meet. You don't understand how it works at the university. You're the Lord of the church. You're not used to 2024 academia. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Let's move on. How about Concordia University, Wisconsin? Now here the language isn't just straight up DEI, just like it wasn't in Ann Arbor. They're part of the same college, actually. So we do have to, remember guys, you have to be scholarly about this, as per last week's episode. You have to use your organized knowledge that we have about the evils of diversity, equity, and inclusion to see what's happening. CUW, Concordia University, Wisconsin. It has an Office of Multicultural Engagement, just like CUAA. And what is multicultural engagement? Remember, it's nothing but a synonym for DEI. How do we know? Well, in this case, the simplest way to answer that question is to look at the provided LinkedIn profile of CUW's Director of Multicultural Engagement, Walter Goodwin, where we read that his expertise is in diversity and inclusion engagement. There you go. There's your answer. So Wisconsin's Concordia, it fosters racism as well with their Black Student Union. And the logo for their Black Student Union makes it perfectly clear. And what do we see here? It says Black Student Union on an afro with a pick in it. And then there's two subtitles or slogans, if you will. Black Lives Matter. Okay. And no justice, no peace. So, I mean, that's basically the, justice for Josiah thing that I got going on here in Humboldt. It's critical race theory and the false gospel of social justice at an LCMS university. And then to make it matters even more clear or worse, the very first student interview video I saw on their Facebook page comes right out and says it. Guy's thinking he's being bold too. He's proud of himself. This student was inspired by Black nationalist Malcolm X with the, the Muslim Brotherhood or something like that, right? It wasn't Christian. It was Islam. Very, there's a clear connection to Palestine too. So he was motivated and inspired by Malcolm X to get educated because he says white people are keeping his people down. That's what he says. Here, watch. Take it from him, not me. I don't need to tell you. Watch the video.
Hello, my name is Christopher Jennings. I attend the Concordia University. Obviously, I attend to the BSU. I'm with the BSU. Black excellence. Black students. What I major is business, entrepreneur. I want to start my own business, be my own boss. And the whole point of that is because I want to do stuff for my people in the community, which is back home, because I know it's a hard situation that they're going through right now, including with the corona going on. But the reason why I want to do that because the person that really influenced me among our history with Black people is Malcolm X. And I'm sure y'all seen the movie. Denzel played him. It's a book. And it's like how the way he started. He started on a dark path, met someone. I forgot his name, but they was in prison, and what made him want to change his life and his whole understanding for our people, which is what I want to do in the next 5-6 years. And what we got going on here is, it's amazing. I'm gonna tell you the truth. These people here, I'm gonna say it, white people, they not letting us get our way. So we coming together as one and trying to make it, easy for us. And I'm thankful to be a part of that. That's all I have.
And it gets worse. You didn't think it could, but it does. It gets worse. We're not just talking about racism when we talk about DEI. It's also about feminism. Have you noticed that all the spokesmen for the pro-Palestine college criminals this week, have you noticed who's been at the microphone? Girls. It's all girl power. It is a bunch of white liberal girls at colleges running these things. And it doesn't stop there. DEI is also about the LGBTQ, as you know. But don't take it from me. I know, I'm just a white dude. White guilt, all that stuff. You don't want to hear it from me. Here's a black woman to tell you about how the BLM movement that our Concordias have embraced, that are right there on the logo of the BSU at CUW, they support the sins of transgenderism.
It is important to pause and to reflect and to consider what happened and ask a very big question, which for whatever reason no journalist was interested in at the time. We were all basically required to either put up a black square or donate to Black Lives Matter or to make some, statement online about how black people are suffering to make sure that Black Lives Matter would receive the $80 million that it received in 1 year. But nobody asked the question, where is all the money going? I was interested because they turned me into public enemy number one for accurately talking about George Floyd, not in the capacity of a hero, but in the capacity of a person who was addicted to drugs and who had enough fentanyl in his system to kill a horse at the time that he died. That made people angry because people were invested in the emotion of Black Lives Matter. And so, look, I'm wearing the shirt. It is the BLM symbol, but instead I've inserted some cash into it because what they really did is they robbed Americans. They robbed Americans' emotions. They extracted emotions. They used black pain to create confusion and to take millions upon millions, tens of millions of dollars from people. And where did the money go, Tucker? That's what the documentary explores, and people are going to be shocked. I hope people are very behind the transgendered movement because that's where a lot of this money went, and then there's just a dead trail because the one thing that you're afforded when you decide that you are transgendered is you can change your name. So you don't know who any of these people were originally, but they received hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars of cash.
Did you hear what Candace Owens said there? BLM was a scam that funneled money into various places, including LGBTQ activists who used dead naming as a way to avoid where the money's going, to play a shell game. Good job, Concordias. Good job. You're supporting racism and transgenderism. Way to go. Now, over at Concordia St. Paul, they have an entire diversity center dedicated to marching to the woke ideals of the world. Chief Diversity Officer Mikhail Tom talks all about it in an introduction video that ends like this.
Diversity Center is not just a physical space. It's a hub for positive change, and combined with our diverse clubs, it forms the heart of our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
And at CUI, you'll find the promotion of DEI lies is a thorough affair that reaches all the way back to the LCMS, sadly. The Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is Monique Nunez, the wife of LCMS pastor and former president of Concordia College, New York, now closed down, Reverend John Arthur Nunez. And I mention that because according to what we read on the Lutheran Hour radio website, together, they lead the consulting group Nunez and Associates. So now, if we click that link over at nunezassociates.org, we learn that Nunez and Associates works with faith-based nonprofit organizations, churches, developing diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies rooted in a Christian ethos in order to promote cultures of reconciliation, resilience, belonging, and unity. Oh, well, that's better. Right, Pastor Bramwell? You happy with that one? No, I'm not. They're not doing DEI like the world, though. So shouldn't you be a little more accepting of that, a little more tolerant of that, a little more accommodating? No. No. Because they're not doing anything according to the Christian ethos. How does one do identity politics according to the Christian ethos exactly? I mean, the only identity that matters according to the Christian ethos is the Christian one. And the only reconciliation that matters in the Christian ethos is the reconciliation between God and man. And then from there, it just naturally radiates out. You don't need an association. You don't need a group that goes around teaching this stuff for money to know how to do this. This is what pastors do. And we don't charge money. We're paid a living wage as the worker is worth his wage, but we're not doing side hustles with this organization teaching DEI in the name of Jesus. No, we truly believe that Jesus is enough to cut through cultural and ethnic differences, enough to unite us. I mentioned this on air before, but let me ask you again. Do you want to eat a brownie that's pure brownie? Or would you be okay with a brownie that's made up of, let's be really generous here, 99% chocolate, but there's 1% dog poop in it? Just 1%. It's 99% Christian ethos and 1% DEI. You okay consuming that brownie? I mean, would you eat a brownie with any amount of dog poop in it? No, we don't sprinkle Jesus on a pile of crap and call it Christian. That's not what we do. Sin isn't sanctified because we use Christian vernacular to perpetuate it. It's still sin. But actually now it's worse than it was before, because now we're committing that same sin that others were committing, but we're committing it in the name of Christ. So Nunez and associates and all the others who think they can just sprinkle little Jesus on sin, sanctify evil, they're not only guilty of fostering the racism and supporting transgenderism and white hate, etc., but now they're also guilty of committing those atrocities, those sins, and then passing it off as if it's God-pleasing. So it makes it worse, not better, to bring Jesus into it. And I say this, guys, completely out of love. Am I fired up? Absolutely. Do I always have to be apologetic about that? Well, I feel like I do, because people say, oh, you're not loving if you do that. No, this is the way Christians behave when they don't like to see their brother Christians led astray. This is the way Christians behave when they don't want to see people go to hell. It tends to bring out a little bit of enthusiasm. And I don't mean that in the way that, like the enthusiasts. I mean that in the common vernacular that we use today. It tends to bring out the excitement of what you're feeling out of the love for neighbor. I say this out of love for every single Christian brother or sister guilty of doing this. Friends, I pray that you would repent of your egregious sin against our Lord. And I pray that the Lord would forgive you, for truly, I believe most of you know not what you do. And those of you who do know what you're doing, who are very aware of what you're doing, I pray your hearts will be softened and you'll stop leading the Lord's little ones astray. I pray you will open your eyes and see what time we're living in. And I pray that before the Master returns, you will straighten up your behavior so that he finds a faithful steward. And the other part of this that I think has to be mentioned is that we have an LCMS pastor with this Nunez and Associates thing. An LCMS pastor and his wife actively working against the teachings of Christianity while being employed by the Christian church. And Reverend Nunez, he has a guest speaker bio on arguably the most popular Lutheran radio program in the world, the Lutheran Hour. I mean, we used to be known, there was a time we were known as the Church of the Lutheran Hour. I mean, no doubt about it. When it was the Lutheran radio show, when Walter Meyer was the host of the Lutheran Hour, it was the most prolific and influential show out there. And it airs even to this day on more than 1,800 radio stations, including, and this is what I mean by it coming all the way back to the Synod, including the LCMS's own KFUO, the radio station of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod that I am familiar with. And you heard me talk about why I left KFUO. Tell me, really, who has a hard time understanding what it means to love biblically? In my show on biblical love, after I terminated my contract with KFUO, it wasn't, and that's why I terminated my contract with KFUO, it wasn't fit for the KFUO airwaves because it was not loving. But pastors who are known to propagate, incubate perpetuate racism, well, they can teach on the KFUO airwaves without a problem. Still see the Lutheran Hour is syndicated through KFUO. Now, I know he's just a guest speaker, but he's still listed as a guest speaker. Now, before we continue, let me also point this out. I know this show's going on long, but hey, we don't have any time restraints, actually, so bear with me as long as you want. Let me point this out in case you don't know. I mean, it's been 10 months since the 68th regular convention of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, so you may have forgotten. And maybe the Synod has already forgot what the Synod resolved to do in Resolution 11-02. Now, as Reverend Roy Askins reported in The Reporter, Resolution 1102A acknowledges that certain organizations, political movements, and ideologies, such as Black Lives Matter, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and critical race theory, include controversial aspects that espouse unbiblical teachings. It also condemns movements such as white supremacy, white nationalism, and Nazism that divide people on the basis of race. With only one friendly amendment, Resolution 11-02A passed by 91.24%. Not me, that's a shame that it didn't pass 100%, but there you go. So I want to know. I mean, I think it's a fair question. What are we doing here, guys? I mean, why do our Concordias have DEI departments and race-based student unions on them still 10 months after that? Why is our Synod radio station syndicating a program that has on a guest speaker who actively is working to corrupt churches and Christian groups with false doctrine? Who's also doing that on one of our college campuses? Do we have to wait 40 years for this stuff to be addressed after a resolution? I mean, it's been that long and counting to address the unionism of the Lutheran Church of Arcata in my neck of the woods. Is that the metric that we're working with here, that when we pass a resolution, we'll get to it within 40 years? I mean, meanwhile, we're just watching the Synod crumble due to unfaithfulness. That's what we're dealing with here. The gospel shower is moving on because we're not being faithful in our own garden. Truly, kudos to the Synod for exercising church discipline against the white supremacists. All for it. 100% have my support. But where's the corresponding discipline for the DEI hustlers? Why do they have our institutional support? Why are they still allowed to corrupt our schools with sinful teachings? Is it because it involves pastors and church workers and not just the laity? Are we only strong on paper? Do we love in word and talk, but not in deed and in truth? I mean, it kind of seems like we've developed a bit of an allergen to 1 John 3:18. But speaking of truth, if you appreciate truth at all costs, why not subscribe or follow the podcast, depending on your preferred platform? No, I didn't say preferred pronoun. I said preferred platform. And go ahead and give the show and this episode a 5-star rating to tell others that you like it and they would too. And while you're helping us spread the show with our neighbors, your neighbors, you might want to also know that members of the YouTube channel are a great help to me in supporting the production of the show. Consider joining the YouTube channel. We have 3 tiers, and they each come with little thank you perks, including thank yous, on-air thank you. So thank you all to the podcast partners, all of you, the whole group. You guys are great. Really appreciate your help. And to our unashamed underwriters whose names are on the screen right now, thank you guys. And as of the recording of this episode, our podcast producers are Ronald MRJ Funk, RL, David Lippman, Asa Hoffman, Seth Murray, Isaac Spangler, Philip, Brian Yamabe, Baron Albatross, and Stephen Billings. So thank you guys for all of your help. I really appreciate your support, and you make this able to grow and get bigger and better and make the production all that much more accessible for people to take in with their ears and their eyes. And if you want to grab a shirt or a sticker from the merch store, we have those available as well at the Tacky T merch store. Link is in the description, along with all the other links that I've mentioned in the show, including the bookshop.org link, where when you select Butterfat Books as the local bookstore that you want to support, you can support the Bramwells because, well, as you may or may not know, We own Butterfat Books right here in Ferndale. And anything you buy from bookshop.org after selecting Butterfat Books as the local bookstore that you want to support, it is as if you purchased that book, whatever it is, any of the books you purchase, theological or otherwise, it's just as if you purchased it from our brick and mortar store at 361 Main Street. A great way to help us. We don't even have to shelve those books, and we still get the profit just as if we did. Friends, I've gone on way too long. We are sinning in a major way on our Concordia campuses, and I fear that we will continue to see the Lord close them as long as our unfaithfulness continues, as long as we persist in this waywardness. Please join me in praying for the repentance of all those who are in stewardship positions over our universities, over our districts, of synod, of churches involved in them as well. May our good and gracious Father forgive them their trespasses, just as he forgives us ours. Now go click the link for Dr. Scare's new book, Without Shedding Blood, There Is No Forgiveness of Sins. As for me, I already ordered my copy, but I do need to go and try to help my daughter find a college to attend next year. If only our Concordias were still Lutheran. Thanks, guys, for tuning into this episode of Truth at All Costs. If you enjoyed it and you want to watch more, here's the playlist for back episodes. Make sure you check that out. Don't miss one. And if you want to watch tomorrow's sermon, do that. This is the Initial Thoughts live stream that prepared me for that sermon tomorrow. Take a look at that, and we'll see you in the next video.